thing that I introduced last night, which was when I shared with those of you who were there a passage from Leonard Cohen's book, from his book Beautiful Losers, which I don't entirely recommend. It's very complex. It's kind of literally kind of self-aware. And even Leonard, when he looked at it, he said it wasn't the best thing I've done. He got his prize in Canada uh, for literature before he wrote that book. And I think his legacy rests on his poetry, maybe one of his earlier books. But there's a passage in there called "What is a Saint?" There's a link in the email we sent out yesterday, and I gave an interpretation last night, which will go up on YouTube soon. And it's the confessions of a gifted poet who suffers greatly internally. Now, one reason I wanted to bring this up is there is a mitzvah of Vahita ach sameach on Sukkot, you shall only be happy. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. Sukkot is also a time of gratitude, and many times we live in life with a sense of the deficiency that we know we should feel gratitude, but something in our soul is resisting feeling that depth. And so there are many people that I know, and I include myself in this, who have gone through very tough times. I want to call it depression, but along with James Hillman, I don't want to share the pathology of the term, because when you're depressed, you take medication or you go to a psychiatrist, to a therapist. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, unless the psychiatrist just wants you to get up to the starting point so you can do the spiritual work, or unless your therapist or psychologist actually leads on a spiritual journey. Because I, along with James Hillman, believe that what we call depression is many times, not all the time. I mean, I'm not about clinical depression. I'm talking about just feeling the blues, feeling that you just can't get yourself started. So from Hillman's perspective, there's a tear in the soul that's calling up to the conscious life for you uh, to disconnect from the conscious life, from stop being mesmerized and fixated on the world out there, and to go to the world within. I wrote about this in my Shabbat thought. So what we call depression, he would call the call from the soul to disconnect from the outer world and to go down into the soul. And one reason is the outer world is not nourishing us. So there's two, in my mind, two basic reasons why the terror in the soul feels so acute. One is our life up on the surface is just not satisfying. Many people have lived unsatisfying lives, have unsatisfying relationships. They're in pain. They're suffering up here on the surface, and sometimes things go so badly that we identify with how things are going. I'll say up on the surface, and if we connect too much on the surface world, our inner life is a reflection of the suffering on the, in the conscious, what I'll call historical life. Another reason I think people suffer deeply within, of many, but I'll just point to one other thing, is when we feel deep regret on what we've done or paths not taken. As you know, oftentimes regret goes into guilt, a terrible sense that you've done things that are unforgivable, or you lived your life in such a way where you've made terrible mistakes, you've gone down wrong paths, you feel you've wasted your life, you've wasted your time, and you look at your life and it just feels to be in tatters. Now, when people feel this, it's a wound that feels almost insuperable. How do we recover from a feeling, of great regret, great guilt, and that you haven't lived your life in the right way? Now, I am not one of these people who says, live with no regret. Somebody actually sent me a talk by somebody, and I was actually repulsed by the idea of people who live with no regret. So I think I talked about this on Yom Kippur. One way to understand this is where people say, well, if I hadn't done that, I would not be here now. So since I love where I am, I don't regret that path I took. And I think there's a basic confusion here. If somebody has done terrible things, And because of that terrible thing, they went to a place in life that brought them to a good thing. It doesn't mean the terrible thing is not regrettable. So we have to distinguish between sometimes a feeling of well-being for where you are and a terrible thing that you did on your way there. Again, either something terrible in a moral sense, you've hurt somebody, or something where you've taken a very wrong path in life. It wasn't honest, it wasn't real. Your decision making was very bad, but it got you where you are now. I think this is the person who says, I don't want to live with a regret. I think we ought to live with regret uh, for things hurtful that we've done or paths taken that we shouldn't have taken. Because if we don't regret, we can't learn. I believe I talked about this in detail on the high holidays. By the way, the Yom Kippur recordings weren't great, but we did have a recording from another really good camera. So we're editing that. We'll be putting that on YouTube as soon as we can. So I try to distinguish between trying to find well-being where I am, um, being relatively whole with decisions that I've made, even if they may not have been that conscious at the time. Certainly regretting when I've hurt people, uh, um, but not to let me be weighed down by it with guilt and shame, because from a psychological perspective and inner life perspective, those are crippling. If you feel guilt, shame, regret that you can't get out of, it's like being ill up in the surface world. It just attacks your core. So I want to offer some actual paths out from that this morning of how one, as it were, treats the soul, how one cares for the soul. Now, one thing I will recommend to you is my talk on Rosh Hashanah morning, where I studied carefully Genesis chapters 21 and 22, especially the story of Hagar that reaches all the way back into Genesis chapter 16. These are stories of people whose lives are shattered, whose lives are in tattered. Even the divine seems to be a very broken kind of a force. So when you look at the inner life of Abraham and Sarah and Hagar and Yitzhak and the divine, it's just an unfolding tragedy. It's hard to know why the rabbis wanted us to read this, other than it says that God visited Sarah and she gave birth to Yitzhak. It is such an really awful, heart-rending story that I wonder if the rabbis knew that if you really encounter the tragedies in Exodus 21 and 22, you can then begin to feel your own sense of tragedy. Because I think when we go through life tragedies, either you are archetypally Hagar or Abraham or Sarah or Isaac or Ishmael or the divine. So these are archetypes of tremendous suffering. And this is an example that if we know how to read the Bible in an archetypal way, and you look and you look at a character in the story, for example, let's say Hagar, where on one hand she's promoted to be Abraham's concubine because Sarah can't bear children, and maybe it went to her head a little bit, and Sarah wanted her expelled, and then Hagar suddenly finds herself from a place that she's lived for many years. She thought she would, be there, the servant of the family till she died. She thought her life was protected, and suddenly she finds herself in the desert with her child, alone and certain to die. And it's really a scene in the Bible of being despondent, of despairing, of alone, and feeling no future whatsoever. Now it happens both in Genesis 16 and it happens in Genesis 21. Probably the same story from two different sources, but it's well to read both. And from an archetypal perspective, we actually try to feel everything Hagar was feeling. So that's why we don't read the Bible, we study the Bible, and from my perspective, to enter deeply into the archetypes of the Bible. Now, what happens with Hagar, remember, is in the depth of her pain, the malach, the messenger or angel of God, appears, and then she sees the well near her. And I believe that's one of the most powerful images of what lies deep in our soul under the pain, which is living waters that are always flowing into us, but the pain actually, as it were, covers up the wellspring and the waters, as it were, dissipate within. And our job is to go in and break through to living waters, break through the debris that's covering it, and let the living waters flow up into our inner life and flow up into our conscious life. Now, I don't think this is permanent. I mean, the times that I've broken through, when I was younger, I thought, wow, I fixed that one, didn't I? But you go to the next day and the debris is back. So breaking through to the living waters, in my mind, is a constant practice. And when you don't continue to break through, the wellspring is plugged, it's blocked, and you have to do it again. So from my perspective, one important thing, part of a spiritual practice, and for me, it's rooted in the Bible and the prayer book. There are, of course, other ways that I'll talk about, because on a daily basis, you have to break through sometimes what I call the vault, the granite block that's between our conscious life and the soul, or sometimes I call it the debris that builds up, and you have to pierce your way through it. And it is very hard, painful work to do it, because to change the metaphor, the Yetzer Hara wants you to feel shame and guilt and stuck. That's its agenda. So sometimes when a person says, but I feel so guilty, if I can, I gently say, it's the Yetzer Hara that wants you to feel guilt. You, higher self, you know that this abysmal guilt is not going to serve you well. It's going to kill your soul. So you and I know this, correct? Yes, we know it intellectually. What is the force in you that doesn't want to pierce through the block and uncover the debris? Kabbalistically, it's the Sitra Achra, the dark side. It's also the Klippa, the shell over the spark. It's the Yetzer Hara, that there's a quasi-external force in us that does not want us to forgive ourselves or even forgive other people. It wants us to be in fixed positions of anger, resentment, guilt, shame, etc. And this is the working of the Yetzer Hara. So borrowing from what I said last night, you might call this is the chaos of the soul, where we are deprived of the light. The light actually is the force against the chaos of this darkness. You can never defeat it, but you can fight it. So there's never a time when you will escape this work, but you can hold the darkness back if you learn how to fight it every day. So as I said before, one of my main paths is the archetypal study of Torah. Another main path of mine is the poetry of the Siddur and poetry in general. But I wanted to share a couple of what I'll call guided meditation techniques that you can use. If you heard of this already, you can perfect it. But if you haven't heard of these kinds of spiritual practices, I want you to know about it. I used to teach this much more than I do now, so I thought I would go back and teach something about this. So first of all, we need to know there's something called the archetypal consciousness, which I sometimes call the dream factory, the part of us that can understand poetry, the part of us that is captured by music. It's not, I don't call it irrational, sometimes call it transrational, or the other part of the inner life. So I don't privilege this kind of processing beyond rationality and virtue. But rationality and virtue can only take you so far. Virtue and rationality ideally can bring some stability to your interpersonal relationships. It can help you develop good moral character, which is always a good thing. Rationality can help you think through problems in life so you don't make the terrible mistakes that we have sometimes made. Part of a rational practice is studying our regret so we don't replicate it into the future. But virtue, rationality, insight can only take you so far. So when we understand archetypal consciousness is the symbol system that has developed within us. Jung would say it actually emerges from the soul. I think that might be true, or that it takes shape because of our spiritual personalities and all the things that happen to us. So there's an entire inner world an archetypal symbolic world, you might say, in which the pain is hidden. And therefore, we have to go down into that world. Some people call this a hypnagogic um, meditation, meaning it's like leading a dream state, hypnos meaning asleep. I simply call it guided meditation through the archetypal world. So I'll give you a little bit of thought about that. Now, I studied this back. I found a book on this on when I studied shamanic practices when I was back in my, I'm going to say, late 20s, early 30s. And I'll teach you what I learned then that I still practice. You try to sit in a quiet place and you start to go into what I'll call the dream world. Now, sometimes what I do is I recall a dream because remember, dreams come out of this world. If you can't recall your dreams, please work on it. It's easy nowadays because I have a recorder right next to me when I wake up, so I can just speak the dream in the recorder and then review them later. But what this book recommended was remember any place where there was an aperture. And I remember when I read the book, I just tried to think, where was I when I felt there was, as it were, some kind of entrance into the other world? And I was just floating in my consciousness looking for it. And then a thought came into me, and that when I was about a 10-year-old boy, and I would be in our backyard swimming pool, and I would look at the pool light, and I would swim toward the light. And I just had this childhood mystical sense that on the other side of the light, there was another world. Another meditation is walking in a garden on cobblestones and just looking down and seeing which cobblestone tells you it's an entry into the underworld. So once you start doing this, and it's as it were, the conscious mind says to the archetypal mind, look for an opening. Look for an opening. Now, if I'm patient enough, it's never happened that an opening didn't appear. So trust me, I hope this works for you, that if you look for an opening, there will be an opening. A cobblestone will move. You'll remember swimming in a pool. Sometimes when you're hiking and you see a glen, a little draw somewhere, you'll be drawn toward it. That's a guided meditation that I teach is walk through the woods and pay attention. And when I've led this meditation, for example, as they're walking, I say, "What's around you?" The person says, "There's a house over to my right." I said, "Well, let's go to the house." And they lead me right into a house, and they walk me into the house, and we explore the house, and people go upstairs and downstairs and open hidden doors, and and then there's the moment when you open the right door, you move the right bookcase, and you're into the cavern of brilliant consciousness. And oftentimes there's actually something there you need to know. It's like the secret of the soul is waiting in that room. And once the person has gotten to that room, I walk them back out. I try to remember, I retrace their steps. I said, let's walk out, turn around, go back through the laundry room, go back up the stairs, go back to the entrance, turn around, memorize the room, go back out the door, walk out to the path, stand on the path, and open your eyes. So when I've done this, what I call the path through the forest, and I'm just waiting for something to appear, for me, it's always been a house off the track, hidden by the foliage, and for many other people as well. For some people, they're walking through the forest and they notice an entrance to a cave. And, I guide the person, well, let's walk to the cave and go inside the cave. And that there are pathways there, and there are incredible cave formations that are luminous and opening up. And people suddenly feel an ominous presence. And I say, do you want to go in there? Because if you don't want to go in there, there's something there that you don't want to know and don't want to hear. So don't force yourself. The person says, no, I'm not terrified. I have trepidation. I said, well, go in and see what happens. And a person went in, and it was a voice of someone who had passed away. that spoke to them something that their soul needed to hear, and the person just started crying. And it's okay. So memorize that entrance, and let's retrace the steps and come out and get back to the pathway and settle yourself in the pathway. Memorize where the cave is and open your eyes. So it can be a cobblestone, it can be a pool light. For me, is oftentimes a house off the trail. Other places for me, I close my eyes and I'm on a windswept beach in winter, and then I notice a house on the beach, and the same thing. I go to this desolate, rain and wind-beaten house on the beach, and I go inside of it, and there are just it's a mansion. There are rooms and rooms and rooms to be encountered. I explore until I can just feel there's the door, there's the staircase, and you go in. Now, not every time, but I would say most of the time that I've done this, there's something there that is a something that I know, but I need to know differently. I need to know it from my archetypal consciousness, not a rational thought, but an archetypal thought. Um, Oftentimes I'm surprised, and other times I'm not surprised, but it's something that I just know deeply. So this is a path to spiritual knowledge of what is happening in the archetypal self. It's not alpha meditation where you transcend consciousness. It's not the same thing as inner work of regulating ego states. It's actually something deeper. And if you try it and you can't do it, I would simply say keep trying, but not try hard. It's you remember portals. You walk down the trail, you walk down the beach in a very gentle way, but you're alert when the call comes. And it's a balance between guiding yourself and then being drawn, guiding yourself and being drawn. Now, so oftentimes when we're suffering greatly, it's because we identify with the pain, but we don't know how to get to what I'll call the archetypal dimension of the soul. So when I've been in tough places in my life, however it is I'm handling things, I'm trying to regulate my thoughts, feelings, emotions through my insight practice that I teach in my wisdom works. So remember, the path that I teach is virtue, rationality. Part of that is processing well with others. Then insight practice to regulate the ego states in the inner life. But that's only, what I call 9/10 of the way. If you don't then add depth, I think we're going to always live without the knowledge of what is happening in our souls. And for some people, that's fine. They don't suffer because of it. But people who are especially sentient, especially feeling, they feel their souls very strongly. By not going into archetypal consciousness, they're not able to do something that is very hard to articulate, but it's something like this. When you bring the light of consciousness into those untraversed regions within you that are waiting for you to explore, they stay unexplored. You're not bringing your exit where the light of your soul down in there. So as you travel in there, I think we are inherently bringing the healing of the light of consciousness into the soul. So the soul here, I mean the aspect of the soul, which is archetypal consciousness, is beckoning us to go in. And as we go in, whenever I've come out, and everybody that I've led on this track, when I work on this kind of meditation with somebody, there's a powerful sense of relief. There's a powerful sense of inner integration. Sometimes the knowledge of something that they know, but now they deeply know it. So if you haven't studied, by the way, you can pick up just about any book on guided meditation, and it will tell you this. But there's a difference between reading it and hearing it and actually doing it, and doing it assiduously until you break through. And once you break through, keep doing it. So I find my dreams is sometimes the high road. I have a dream, I record it, I listen to it, and as I look at the dream, this is another practice of dream work that leads you to the same place. Feel free to gently question the dream. So I look at, for example, a person in the dream, and I would say, you don't say who are you. You can say like, well, oh, no, you don't say what do you mean. You can say who you are, you, what's your name. They go, not the question. That's not the question. That's the question. Do you have a message for me? That's not the question. And you have to find out like what's the question that I ask of this symbol, this person, and so forth. And if you learn how to query a dream correctly, it will unfold itself before you and then take you to the next stage in the dream. So try to imagine the soul is a dream factory where they produce plays every night, and there's a script, and there's music, and casting, and settings, and costumes, and your unconscious puts all this together and puts on a play for you every single night, and then we don't remember it. We don't pay attention to it. And I just try to imagine those writers down in the soul writing this incredibly inventive, beautiful, meaningful, poetic play. And they say, well, is she going to watch the play? Is he going to pay attention? And no, I don't remember my dreams. They're going, really? You don't remember your dreams? Like we put all this effort into it, and you're just going to say, I don't remember my dreams. So I think your dreams, and by the way, the rabbis in the Talmud say, a dream uninterpreted is a letter not read. A dream uninterpreted is a letter not read. So try to imagine the soul is sending you a letter, a message. This shows my age, and you just decide not to open the letter. You know, that's sitting there on your table. I'm not going to open that letter. It's like from the soul to you. I'm not going to read it. So uh, doing dream work, which is recalling dreams. The more you recall them, the better you get at it. Gently querying the dream, and when you gently query the dream, you end up in the same place that I taught about before, which is it's your entry into archetypal consciousness. And archetypal consciousness, if you gently push the self down there, the archetypal consciousness will gently pull you. And again, I just want to emphasize, you have to be very, very cognizant of your feeling tone. When you stop feeling, stop walking. Just pause and wait until you're called to take one path or another. One time I felt dread, and I pushed myself, and I wish I hadn't. I went into a kind of scene of horror. I don't know why it was there. I don't know what it meant, but I think I understand where horror stories come from. I pulled myself out, and I said to myself, don't ever do that again. When my archetypal consciousness says, don't come here, I'm going to say, yes, okay, I will not go there. I will follow directions. So I want to give you a couple of vivid, just snippets. Um, as I was looking for my entry in, I found a wolf on a hill in a forested area, a lone wolf howling at the moon. And sometimes I feel like I am a lone wolf howling at the moon, just utterly solitary. In a good sense, by the way. I know I need my solitude. I need my time alone at night on the hill with the moon. That's something I oftentimes go to. And then the dream just moved, and again it went to a cave opening, but this time it was over a grotto. It was down into a cave underneath where the water from the ocean was flowing in to this a cave that opened out into the sea. I went down in there, and I found the ruins of a P-38 World War II aircraft, like just not destroyed, but not, like crash landed into the grotto. Well, my father was a medic in a P-38 squadron in World War II. And one of his jobs was to take the ambulance out and rescue pilots who were in shot up planes. And I just thought, okay, what, like, is my dad here somewhere? And I just went into this sense of feeling my father's presence. Like I think like many people, a very complex relationship. Um, and it was just feeling my dad. And my dad's story, he told me many stories of his time in World War II and going through France and into Germany, things that were hard for him to talk about. Um, and my soul said, you need to spend some time with your father. And I just absorbed it. And I looked at the P-38 crash landed in the grotto. and I memorized it. I can still see it. I saw, the moonlight flickering on the stones, like reflected from the sea. I climbed out of the grotto. I went back to the hill. I didn't become the wolf, but I could see the wolf, and then I brought myself out. And wow, it was this to this very day, I'm very moved by that. Now, I could give you dozens of those stories, but I want to share with you that it's something I needed to know. It's something I needed to experience. So I want to recommend this to you. This spiritual practice of guided meditation through archetypal consciousness. Now I want to read something to you that I wrote right before the high holidays that I decided not to send out because it's not finished. Um, but I was thinking about this today, right before Rosh Hashanah. I wrote something, and I wanted to share it with you. And I think if I share it with you, then maybe someone can write me an email and says, "Well, here's how you could sharpen that, Rabbi Finley." Now it's right before Rosh Hashanah, so I'm thinking about um, the story of the Akedat Yitzchak, um, you know, Abraham's attempted murder of his son on the mountain called Hagar goes into Be'er Lachairoi, the well of the God who sees me. Har Moriah is the mountain of being seen. There are incredible plays on words there. And when I do some meditations before Rosh Hashanah, I try to imagine myself, I'm Isaac, um, just intuiting that my father is leading me to slaughter me. And Bob Dylan talks about this in Highway 61. And sometimes on this Torah portion, I actually send you a thought that I wrote about Highway 61, the place where we're stranded, or we're Isaac, and sometimes we're Abraham and the angel and God. I'll probably send that out again this year on a Torah portion, Vayira. So in any case, this was on my mind. And then a counseling session was on my mind that I want to share with you. So I never do this, but I thought, well, since I'm going to be opening up my game, I thought I'd read something to you. So here's how it goes. Quote, "My life feels like dirt. This is what a young poet told me. Her life was in order, but she was a poet. Good job, good income, good partner. It didn't matter. She was blocked from her creative source. She reached out to me. After a few moments of conversation, I asked her if she had ever studied the Duino elegies, poems finished by Rilke at Duino Castle in 1922, hence the name Duino elegies. She said she had read the work, but never studied it. So I recommended that she and I study the Duino elegies, the first elegy. So here's how the Duino elegies start. So this is Rilke. Who, if I cried out, would hear me among the orders of the angels? Even if one of them suddenly clasped me to his heart, I would expire before his much stronger existence. For beauty is really nothing but the beginning of terror that we are only just able to bear. And we hold it in awe as disdainful, serene. It refrains from annihilating us. Every angel is terrifying. And I remember when I read this again as a young man, I had a like the best of Rilke, and this was in it. Um, uh, and it was my deep introduction to angels was reading the Duino elegies. And when this person said, "My life tastes like dirt," I just thought there there are this is now I'm not reading, I'm sharing with you. There are angels, terrifying angels, stopping her from finding the beauty, which is the source of the poetry. So we studied there's a few more paragraphs here that I'm not including, but we went over 3 paragraphs over and over again. And then I said to her, "I think you're terrified of angels." And she said, "I don't believe in angels," but then regretted saying it because we're studying Rilke, we're not studying theology. And I said, "You're blocked because terrifying angels stand between you and the terrifying beauty locked in your soul, yearning for you to redeem that beauty into words. So she said to me, I'm not that good of a poet. Not yet, I said. But if you want to relieve the pain, you will have to fight terrifying, sword wielding angels blocking you from your soul. And she said, teach me. We met 2 more times. And at the end of our third meeting, she said, thank you, Rabbi Fidley. And that was it. Now I'm speaking to you. I don't know how to teach sword fighting with angels because I want to redeem hidden poetry in my soul. I'm not that good of a poet. But I learned angel sword fighting because I wanted to know how to pray. This is me talking about myself in my 20s. Now I'm fast forwarding now to my 50s. Yeah. In a dream, um, I fought my way to a book of forgotten prayers. This is true what I'm telling you. In a dream, I found it in my lectern at the Wilshire Ebell Theater. So in a dream, I'm at the Wilshire Ebell, and I go to my lectern, and there it was. It was in Hebrew, Sefer HaTfilot HaNishkachot, the Book of Forgotten Dreams. Leonard Cohen was attending service at the time. I think I had this on Rosh Hashanah. I went back to Yom Kippur, and I told to Leonard, and he gave me 2 words of instruction. I'll let you imagine what those 2 words were. And I've been trying to live by those words ever since. Now, back to duenologies. Who among the angelic orders would hear you if you cried out? And if one of them heard you, would you allow the power of the being of the angel clasp you to his heart? It would know you beyond your layered masks, beyond the carefully constructed caricatures of yourself, drawn by a stubborn force within you, blocking you from your soul, blocking you from the mountain where you will be seen. You will be seen. You will find your forgotten prayers. Every day, I fight my way through terrible angels to my book of forgotten prayers, except on days when I forget. The forgetfulness mounts up. Now, I was writing this right before Rosh Hashanah. Then the days of awe, set in the calendar as a mountain range of being seen, reach in from a place beyond the angels and redeems me from forgetfulness. The days reach out and teach me. You can find what the terrifying angels are hiding from you. You can remember what they want you to forget. You can learn how to fight the terror and the angels on the mountain of being seen. And as I wrote this right before Rosh Hashanah, we arrive at the foot of the mountain this coming Wednesday night. So it's a little bit too dark for me to send this out to the whole world, but I thought I'd share it with you. And that's I think the sum of my teaching today is that real deep heaviness of spirit, and what we call depression, and James Hillman would say your soul calling you in. There's a world in there, and I've been doing this work for so many years. I got an incredible gift, and I'm trying to think when this happened. Yeah, I must have been in my 50s, or certainly before 2014 when I turned 60. So this was, somewhere in my mid 50s. And I got a gift. I had a dream that took me to a Sefer HaTfilot HaNishkachot, saying, sorry, right at my lectern at the Wilshire Ebell. And there it was. And in the dream, I didn't read it. I just contemplated it. And so here's what Leonard said to me. He said, write it. Those are his 2 words, write it. And that was, I think, both an invitation to write them out, which I have done. They're kind of hidden. If you got our Oratora email for the high holidays, I included a passage of a book called Rabbi Talk that I've been working on, and there's a very obscure passage, and we're upset, yeah, send it out. It's not going to hurt anybody. So if you read that, I wonder where that came from. It's part of this, my conversations with my soul that I've been working on for forever. So you have a book of forgotten prayers, and I believe, metaphorically at least, one reason we suffer is we having gone in past the terrifying angels, found our book of forgotten prayers. Um, it's not for me. It's not that I open it up and read it, but rather it's an invitation to go in. Like I'm not, I'm a good expository writer. I don't know if I'm certainly not a poet, but what I just sharing with you are things I come up with, and I write them down. They're very meaningful to me, and I hope you all found some meaning that well. So I'm offering you an invitation to traverse archetypal consciousness, at least as one way of dealing with sometimes the unbearable suffering that we feel. And when we go into that realm and we find our book of forgotten prayers, there are moments of relief and deep insight, and then the invitation to just keep working the path. All right, that's my teaching for this morning.